Welcome back to Weekend Walkabout in our gardens and yours virtually.
We're coming to you from gardenatozz.org. I'm Stephen Nicola.
I'm Janet McConovich, and we're in New Zealand. So we're talking about the North Island, Florida this week.
And we're with our daughter, Sonia, who's helping us out.
And we're into part two here. It would appear part two. And this is where we move into our next priority, landscape for the birds. That the birds, well, we'll tell you about that as we go along. As
That's
always,
us.
and we're so grateful for it, our daughter Sonia Nicola is with us, and she is literally with us in the next room at the hotel here.
Too much feedback if we were all together.
Yeah, so we're working on it together. She's in charge of technicalities and getting the questions lined up, and she's an excellent gardener in her own right, but she's also a professor at a university in Toronto. She's been teaching classes and running her hours virtually this week here. Landscape for the birds. For us, it's important. Birds are as important to us as the plants are in the garden, and the plants are what support the birds, and the birds are what help the plants.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things on our list when we said when we want to go to New Zealand, what do we want to do? I said I want to see a natural area. I want to see the way New Zealand was or could be with just its native plants growing, and without disturbance. And in New Zealand, where many over the last century and a half, century and 3/4, people have been coming here and bringing their plants from home. They have seen changes to the island culture, just as in Hawaii, etc. When they introduce something that makes a big change, they've seen a lot of things happen and are actively trying to stop that from happening because they have a unique environment, a unique ecosystem. They are a separate island from everything and have been separate for tens of millions of years. And they have only 2 native mammal species, and they're 2 bats. The rest of their animals are birds or amphibians or lizards. And not very many lizards.
No
snakes.
snakes.
They have no venomous snakes. And many of these animals live on the ground because they never had mammal predators. So some of their birds were wiped out, have already been wiped, like the great moa through hunting, but also through just the introduction of animals that eat them and hunt them on the ground. So in a number of places, they have cleaned up an island. The New Zealanders have gone out and rid an island, essentially, of the rats, the stoats, that's like a weasel, the possums, the cats,
and pigs.
And pigs, if there were pigs there, sheep, deer, things that were introduced, and cleaned up the island, and then taken the remaining birds that they can find of the endangered species and move them to the island. I said, I want to go to one of those places and walk and see. I want to hear birds. I want to see birds. So from the port of Auckland's main port, from the ferries wharfs, we left on, this is the boat that took us out. First, though, we had to clean up entirely. Brushes to brush the bottom and sides of your boots, and then hanging from the top. In this case, Sonia has taken the spray bottle off and is spraying a disinfectant on her feet because they've cleaned the island. They don't want fungus diseases and pests to come in on the soles of your shoes, on your fingers, or anything else. So you not only have to clean up your shoes entirely, and you get a biosecurity lecture, but the sniffer dog is going to sniff, and here she's not sniffing for vegetables. She is sniffing for the plague skink. Oh, the skink. Yes, the plague skink, which is a skink that is not native and it doesn't hunt other things, but it multiplies so rapidly that it takes up the environment from the native skinks. So this dog is trained to smell just that species of skink, and has smelled all of the backpacks of the kids in this group that are going out here, and the purses and bags that people are carrying. And they ask you to make sure there's nothing in your backpacks that's alive. So we it was about a 40-minute boat ride out to the island to Tiri Matangi, which is like many of the islands there, has rock formations offshore, lots of seabirds on those islands, on those rock formations. And you disembark and head down the ramp where a ranger is waiting there by the truck, which could take your heavy stuff if you'd like to the visitor center while you walk the trails.
Some people stay there for a few days.
Right, they can
So
bunk
they
up.
have some very heavy backpacks coming.
So they can bunk up with the staff.
Yeah.
And then you get a biosecurity lecture, which basically says, welcome, and these things are not allowed. You can't bring a dog. If anything runs out of your pack that looks like a mouse, you are to come and report it to us. You stay on the paths. You're not to wrestle with things.
And actually, after having been on the island, you have almost no choice but to stay on the paths.
But the entire island is a nature reserve. They show you the island the way that it looked when it was just farmed. It was all just sheep ranches and grazed down to nothing, and is now grown up in vegetation. Along the way, they tell you and stop after stop where you are so that you can follow the different trails. Great walking information. Wonderful areas where you can go out and see the sea. It was a cloudy, almost rainy day, so we didn't always get the light to show it, but here you can see the different colors in the water.
Yeah.
Sonia was very keen to see penguins. She said, I want to see penguins more than anything else. I want to see penguins. I'm going with you. I want to see penguins. These are penguin nesting boxes where you could lift the top, and if there was a penguin there, you could see it through the box. Little blue penguins. I think this one is called the smallest species of penguin.
Yep.
We did see one in there.
Yeah.
We did see one. But
Couldn't get a picture of it though.
But mostly we saw beautiful plants. Look at this fern.
Look at that. I would buy that for a minute until you kind of look at it.
Yeah,
I would
see it
and
settle
say,
down, settle
wait a
down.
minute. It is kind of popping up
I said,
everywhere.
That's a traveler, Steve.
It's a beautiful plant.
Beautiful
though.
traveler, but let's look at it and see what
It
let's admire it as a wild.
We're
thing.
trying to get rid of ostrich fern. Why would we bring in another
Another
fern
fern
that
that
would do the same thing?
The trees, these are many of these are the New Zealand Christmas tree, which is the
Don't ask me.
Pohutakawa.
Thank you. I always put the consonants in the wrong place. Pohutakawa trees, and they've been sculpted by the wind. That's a tree, but it looks like a shrub. Nobody's pruned it. They're just laying in confirmation to the wind, because there is a lot of wind, especially on the west side of the island. We were holding our hats down and realized why I need a chin strap. Well, those Aussies wear chin straps, and the Kiwis wear wind straps. And you go along, no, not a bird of paradise. This is a flax plant. Many of the flax plants have flowers that look like that bird of paradise, but much smaller. Places where you can walk out onto the beach and see that there are islands all around. Many islands off the shore, and information that says, here are the birds that you're likely to see in this area, which is kind of cool. The little green parrot there, it's called the red-crowned parrot. The red-billed oyster catcher, which sure enough was walking along the shore, oyster catching. Cute little guys. Look at, that's an almost iridescent red bill. And the pied shag, some people call the species that are shags cormorants. They call them shags in New Zealand. And then off into the brush, woods and fields, underneath one of the I did it again. I've got everything in the wrong place. Pohutakawa trees.
Pohutakawa.
You notice I'm not trying to pronounce any of these.
Yeah.
It's a big tree with a really cool canopy that you can't see how cool it was.
People have said that they like that we pronounce the botanical names of plants. I can tell you that this is a Metrosideros excelsior, but the other plant name I have not written enough times. That's how I learn the names and can pronounce them, is if I write them down repeatedly. Same thing with Steve. He wrote them enough times that then he gets them. But I have not done this one enough times. Pohutakawa tree. Isn't it beautiful? And this is a big tree. This is a very big tree. It's not as big as the biggest tree. We'll get to that a little bit later. I'm walking under the branches of some of those trees and some kofi trees. Look at that trunk. Is that gorgeous or what?
It's so cool.
I could just live on looking out my window at that. And birds, they promised us birds. I wanted birds. Oh, did we hear birds? The hee-hee. are the stitchbirds from the Coromacco, or the bellbirds. We saw both stitchbird and the bellbird while we were there. We'll get into birds separately, but mostly we walked. Sonia and Cam walked further than we walked because we're slow taking pictures and talking, and because we're slow.
And we're
Yeah.
a little older.
Yes, a 14-year-old informed us when we were here that we were too old to do that. I said, yeah, we probably are. Admiring the plants as they grow naturally, sculpted by the wind, by the waves in many cases, by their association with, in this case, this is gorse. And gorse is a terrible weed. One of the invasive plants that the New Zealanders are trying to get rid of actively. And here on the island, they're still working hard on it. They've done incredible work since 1980 on this island. Thousands of volunteers have helped plant native plants to reestablish forest in what was essentially a scoured, nothing but farm pasture land by the time they got done.
Yeah.
And now it's reverted to what it should be, with the cabbage palms here, with the Pahutakawa above the other things, with the remus here looking fluffy, all these different colors, all these different kinds of trees. Think about where you are in where we are in the Midwest or in the Northeast. You're going to look out and see a forest that is primarily one kind of tree blending into a second kind of tree, not every kind of tree together.
Just going.
But that's the way that it is here. It's gorgeous. Flax in the open places. Most of the paths we were walking on were still grasses that probably were not native, but gradually other things are taking over some of the fescues and carexes and flaxes that are native here. We were reading recently that if the gorse is left where there is a native seed bank, within 50 years, the native plants can take back over again. And that's a promising thing for them. Looking at the flax, just beginning to bloom, and looking at the birds. This is a tui. We really like the tui. Big mouth birds, but we really like the tui. The tui is demonstrating one of the reasons that the birds in New Zealand look a little different to us. Many of them do. See the curve of the flax flower? See the curve of the bill?
Just a
This is the tui and his little white wattles, that he's got 2 white wattles. And that beak fits just exactly into the curve of the flax flower, because the flax family is a big one here. And if you look, you'll see the beak of the bellbird has the same curve to it, because they are all into the nectar.
Curve.
Yeah. Most of the birds that we saw like this, though. This is one of the red crown parrots. I said, right here. Steve is amazing at being able to capture things, but boy, these guys jumped up out of the ground and took off across the way. Little ground birds. This one had a real attitude, but Steve captured enough of it to find that orange ring around the eye tells us that was one of the ring eyes, and we're identifying which of the ring eyes it is. He was standing on the path in front of us as we headed down to Fisherman's Bay here. Another beautiful spot walking along the island. And this one where we took off our coats and our hats and carried them, because one side of the island was windy and quite cool, and this side was beautifully warm and not windy at all. Just gorgeous places. And down the path toward the visitor center, Steve realized how much it looked like the Lord of the Rings. And
not quite tall enough, but
get off the path, get off the path. And if you know the Lord of the Rings movies, then you would know where that comes from. If not, you don't need to know.
And the diversity of the canopy, forest canopy,
just incredible diversity.
You're not seeing the really true.
It's hard to explain.
The picture doesn't show it.
It is a jungle, a tropical jungle, and thank goodness for Stephen being able to show some of it for us. So that's the landscape for the birds, Tiri Matangi, and these are the birds that we saw. So the pied shag on the left, and if you look, you can see all the colors streaking by.
Red, blue, green, yellow.
That's the red-crowned parrot, which we did eventually capture one of. This guy right here is the common blackbird. He's black. This guy with the attitude, we're still working on. We may be seeing him in his juvenile stage too. Doesn't he look like he has an attitude? That's just an orange spot behind his eye, but it does make him look like he's one big grump, doesn't it? This is the bellbird. Steve, you can show the birds that you can go through some of the birds, and I'm going to play for you what the bellbird sounds like. If I can remember where I put it.
That's another bellbird, because I
Yes,
don't know
that's
the birds. I
that's
just take
That's
pictures.
another bellbird showing his attitude too. Little
Yeah.
tiny bird with a
But
big
again,
attitude.
But
Okay, let's listen to what the bellbirds sound like.
Oh, I think Zoom is doing that thing where it doesn't pick up.
It
Oh, it
the
doesn't pick
sound.
up. Oh, that's
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's so
It has a
intense.
filter on it.
I've never heard.
Okay.
Maybe next week, if we play it on the computer and then you can share sound through the computer, we can hear it better. So maybe for
Can
next
we
week,
do that?
see if
We can
get.
share it.
Yep, we can do that.
All right. All right.
Yeah,
we'll
I
do
can get that done for next week.
See, that's why we have Sonia here.
Well, maybe we can get that
Besides-
done. Let's fit it
Yes.
into the waking
Yeah.
hours this time. There's the tui. Don't you love those fluffy feathers
Fluffy
around the neck?
feathers and the
blue, a
colors.
bright blue. When it opens its wings and flies, it is so bright blue underneath the wings. The red billed gull. Red-billed gull. This is called the welcome welcome. What's the one that flies around like the purple
So
martin?
swallow.
Swallow, welcome swallow. This is the welcome swallow. Don't you love those beautiful colors?
Yeah.
Because they often welcome you as you come in on your boat. This is their native wood pigeon.
And it's a big bird.
Steve was so excited when we saw the
I thought
first
it was
one.
a hawk.
It's a hawk, it's a hawk, it's a hawk. Just an enormous.
They don't have many hawks here. There's a harrier hawk, a kite, and a falcon.
This is and the kite is very rarely seen and doesn't really
Yep.
belong here.
Doesn't belong.
Doesn't this look a little like it's got a cape on, like Batman? This is the which
It's a
parakeet is
parakeet.
this? This is a parakeet. Oh,
Not the parrot.
another big mouth, another real big mouth.
Yeah, very noisy.
I can't see the head on this one because my chat screen's on top of it. And I think this is one of the ones we're still working
Yes.
on. Because it might be the juvenile form of this one, which might be blackbird, maybe, but is different than that other that we saw, because that is not the crow.
Well, they call it magpie.
Magpie, right? Magpie.
Australian mag. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this guy in here might be a saddleback, but we're working on that because we couldn't get him to stay still, and he doesn't have the right markings on his chest to be a saddleback. So we're working on that. And this guy right here, you gotta look at the second picture. He's got a white head, and by gosh, there's a white head wren. There's also a yellow head wren. So we're working on that one. This one we're unclear on entirely, but we liked this bird quite a bit. It didn't like us. And here's our guy with
That's
the
the attitude.
who, when he flies, has this bright white on him, and we're trying to figure out what that one could be.
Yep.
This is for us as fun as figuring out the plants. The magpie. He should have been with the other.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions that have come in?
I don't think that we have any questions, although Barb, whose son actually lives in Christchurch, suggests the Albatross Center in Otago. You can watch the little blues come in from their day out. I think that maybe the penguins are there as well at the
All
the
right,
Albatross
all right.
Center.
There's the penguin place, and we'll be circling back toward Christchurch. Maybe next week we'll have penguin pictures.
And we did have a question too from Michelle about annoying bugs like ticks. And I went ahead and looked it up. That New Zealand does have an endemic tick for birds that doesn't transmit or attach to humans. And that even their livestock ticks that were imported don't seem to spread disease the way they do for us in North America.
Yeah.
So that was my own little mini research quest.
It's also given us quite a pause that we're not running into mosquitoes. So we're asking questions about the insects, but not learning yet.
We don't know. Maybe it's the weather. We're walking through what seems like jungle, and there's no insects.
Yeah. Although
there's insects,
yeah,
but
they were
not.
droning over my head at
Yeah.
some point. And we do know that they have the marmorated stink bug, the brown marmorated stink bug, which is a problem, a fairly new problem in the Midwest too. The invasives do find their way in. And we know that there is an 8-inch centipede that has a nasty bite, and I'm not looking for that one.
No.
Thank you very much.
No, don't need to see an 8-inch centipede.
So if there's
Anyway.
nothing else, we're gonna power through because we've got some miles on us here in New Zealand.
We've been around.